Good evening. Sorry, I'm a little late. I was getting my kids settled, and yeah, it takes a bit more work to get kids settled. So I am here. I'm here tonight to share my history, my favorite history books for my children. As you know, I homeschool my kids, and I love sharing history with my children. So I'm going to show them to you now so that you can see what I use. Um, because I'm Canadian, I obviously read Canadian history. And we also read British history and world history. And I do have books on American history, and I have books on French history also. I'm trying to think. And I have Bible history and church history. So we have lots of types of histories in our house. And but we've not and sorry, but we primarily focus on Canadian, British, and world history. So, without further ado, I will share with you what I use. Now, I have looked at quite a few history books, and some of them I couldn't find because they're just so hard to find. I just realized I have another Canadian history book that I did not have here on my stand here. So I'm just going to show you. This is what I have here. My little collection. And I have one history book that I forgot to bring up. Hello, Dilla. And I don't have it. So I'll have to just tell you what it is. I'm going to have to think about it, what the title is. But anyways, okay, so Canadian history. It's been hard to find a really good Canadian history book. They're hard to find. I'm just going to say it. And especially one that covers from the beginning to modern times. I have only found one book, and it has a lot of information in it, but it's not really exciting to read. But I still have it because it has the modern section in it, so go figure, because that's all I could find, honestly. There's not many for us Canadians. I hope somebody comes out who's a good writer. Okay, this is a plug. Whoever is a good writer and is Canadian and loves history, please write a really good Canadian history book that is thorough and don't include as much bias. Just saying. But it would be great if you would make one of those for us, because we need it so bad. Okay, so Canadian history, what I start with, I have looked at a lot of books, as I said. A lot of books are dumbed down for children, and they're boring, like terribly boring. So I settled on this book. I have children in the ages grades 7, 5, and 2. And this book we're reading for everybody, and it's about a grade 5 level. It was written for Canada. It was in our schools in 1950, and it's really good. And I don't know if I'll be able to flip this camera. Oh, here we go. I got it. So I'm showing you my house. So this is the book. And yes, I read offline, online. It's called The Story of Canada. It's written by, I'll just zoom in here, if you can see it. Sorry, I'm wiggling there. George Williams Brown. And it's a really good book. It goes up to 1950. And that's what it looks like. Got too fast. Story of Canada. It's the Cobb Clark Co. Limited. That's the publisher, and it's a really good book. And so it covers from the beginning all the way to around 1950, I believe. And it has nice pictures in it. As you can see, this is the way at the beginning. And I find this at this website, archive.org. It's really easy to find. You just have to put it, sorry, let me just flip this over. It's really easy to find online. You just type in The Story of Canada by George Brown, and it'll pop up in your Google. It's really easy. and I have used it online, and I'm excited because somebody is sending me a copy. I have looked for this book everywhere. It is hard to find. I do know that some people have been able to get reprints from different places, and I honestly don't know where they are. But there is a group called Charlotte Mason Canada, a Facebook group for Canadians, and we've been discussing this book in there this past week, and a bunch of moms have, or not a bunch, but a few moms have had it reprinted for themselves from different group, organizations, and they have been able to do it that way. But a mom found two in a bookstore, and she's sending me one. Isn't that nice? I'm just like, yay! So I can't wait till I get the book and have it in my hands, because I'm not keen on reading off the computer. I just prefer books. So that's the book I use for my kids. We read history together, and we really like it. It's, like I said, it's about a grade 5 level. It's easy to read, but not too easy. Like my little ones couldn't read it. But yeah, it's good. And then after that book, I do have another book called Dickie. It's written by, I got to look it up. Hold on. I have it downstairs. I don't want to run downstairs. The author's last name is Dickie, and it's called Adventures in Canada. Now, let me see. It is, I'm just going to bring it up on Amazon so you can see what it looks like. Okay. All right. This is one copy of it. Here it is. Okay, there it is. Oh no, that's for children. Sorry, this is the wrong one. My First History of Canada is also apparently a very good one. I do not know it myself, but it is a good book, apparently. It's for younger children, like grade 1 to 3. I'm going to click on that, and I'll show you the one I was looking at. I wonder if it's here. This is the one I was using. The Great Adventure, An Illustrated History of Canada. Now, I have it downstairs, and I actually forgot to find it. Okay, let me bring it back. I forgot. Oh, come on. Continue. You press all these buttons, and they suddenly do something. That book, The Adventures of Canada, I think it's called again. Let me see this here. The Great Adventure, An Illustrated History of Canada. I have that book. My book is like a tan book. It's about this thick, a normal size book. And it is written for more of like a grade 7, 8, 9 level book. Again, it was in our schools 50 years ago, or no, now it would be more than that, 70 years ago. And it is a really good book, but I will say it is much more dense. So basically they'll tell you the story, and then within that they'll take moments to jump off and go into detail about that particular time. And so you have to be able to follow where they're going, because sometimes it's kind of hard. So that's why you have to be a stronger reader, and it is much more dense. I would say it's for like a higher level grade. My grade 7er can read it, but it's a lot to read. It's I would say even grade 8, 9. That's honestly where I would say. And then after that, we have had a hard time finding high school history books. I'm going to be honest. Oh, sorry, before I do that, not high school. Okay, I forgot to tell you. Once I'm done those books, because we go up to 1950, what do? That is where I get this book, and I'm going to turn it around. That's where I get this one, The Story of Canada by Lunn. This is the updated edition, so it is up to date as of, I think, 2010 or 2015. And it is the newest version. And I use that one to finish up our up to present day. And it has a lot of good information in it, but it's not as fun to read. It's a little more dry, if that makes sense. Because you want books that are just going to be really captivating, right? And then the kids are going to want to keep on reading it. But boring, not always good. But we use that one because that's all we have. So that's what we use for the kids. And I do a 4-year cycle of history. So every 4 years we go through the entire Canadian history. And we use, so if my kids are in grade 1 to about 6, 7, 8, we use the Brown book, the Story of Canada by Brown, and then transition into the Story of Canada by Lunn, the latter end. And then once they go into the higher levels, I start them on the Adventures, the Great Adventure by Dickey, and then I also transition them into the Story of Canada at the end, just because we don't have anything updated. Now, having said that, I also have, let me see here, where is it? I also have this history book. Oh my goodness, my stuff fell. This is a book that I had my older boys use when we first started homeschooling, when they got into the higher levels, and it's a really good book. It is a college or university level book, and it is solid. It's an adult book, I'll be honest, but it's very good. This one, The Structure of Canadian History by Finlay and Sprague. Now, this was what my husband read in university, and he has kept it, so we use it for our schooling. It is very thorough, and it's very much of a high-level history book. And so my boys have used that book, have read that book, so yeah, that's the other thing. Also, you can also use these books, the Canada, A People's History. Now, I'm going to try to do this. There's 2 of these. There's Canada, A People's History. CBC made a set of videos, DVDs, and it's called this, Canada, A People's History. This is backwards, sorry. This is the first book, and this is volume 2. They're very good. Generally, they cover everything. They do leave out some things, which is ironic. Like, I don't understand that. But but people have used them for their homeschooling. But they have had to supplement for those 2. Okay, because they're missing some key things in the book. But ironically, even though the books are not good, I dropped my other ones down here. What is really good, I'm like talking amazingly good, for Canadian history. And my husband has, sorry, I'm just picking up my mess here. My husband has read many books on Canadian history. Like, I'm talking many, at a high level. And he has never found a history book that has actually been very thorough. Like, really, really thorough. In, well, his quality, because he did his he did a joint honors in history at McGill, and so he had to read tons, and he did not find a history book that had everything in it. He had to read multiple books in order to get the full picture of history. But when CBC came out with these videos, Canada, A People's History, my husband watched them with our boys, our older boys, and he says these are the best source for Canadian history. The best. So we watch these for fun in our house when we're having family time or something, and yeah, they're really good. They're thorough. He says these are the best. He has never found a resource like these ever. So get these videos, DVDs, if you want to know about Canadian history. They're very well done, and there's 4 sets, and there's many hours in each set, so you'll have a lot of viewing time for that. So that's my Canadian history. That's what I do. And then going on from there, we do British history, and I have chosen to pretty much go with the status quo on that, and that is we start with our island story. Now, the reason why I cover British history is because Canada is so intertwined with British history, like it's crazy. So we get our government is very much similar to theirs. I mean, we share a queen. It's just that she doesn't have as much rule in our country as she does in England. But we start with this book, Our Island Story, for the younger kids. So grade 1s to 4, 5, 6. My grade 7er loves this book, so he's joining us on this one. And so we read this one through. This only goes up to the 1900s, the early 1900s, like 1901. It ends at Queen Victoria. And it starts at the beginning with their myths from like, who knows when, all the way up to 1900. And then what happens is, what do you do after that if you want to continue on? Well, I found this book online. Now, I'm going to be honest, I have not read it. But this is the one I found. It's called The Story of Britain from the Norman Conquest to the European Union. So it comes up to right modern day. It's by Patrick Dillon with illustrations by P.J. Lynch. And it's this white book. And I bought it off Amazon. Okay? So it's a really good finishing book. Like I do with the Canadian history, I just bring it up to par with that. And that's what we read. If it's older children, like high school, a lot of kids read this when they're in their middle school years, but I find this is a little dry. This is the history of England from the land of Julius Caesar to present day. Well, present day for this book was the early 1900s. Okay, it stops at that point. And it's by Arnold Forster. I've read a little bit of this. I find it a little dry, personally. And if you're going to read this, you have to have some background knowledge of English history, of British history, to read this book. It's very thick, okay? Very thorough and very thick. And again, I would finish it off with this book because it brings it up to modern day, if you want to bring it up to that point. I don't always do that with British history because after a while they don't have a lot of significance in our world, in Canada anymore, but it's nice to finish it off, right? So last but not least, okay, before I go to world history, for American history, in our house, I have American history books. I have Gerber's American history books. And I also have this one. This is very popular amongst homeschoolers. This Country of Ours by H.E. Marshall. So those I keep on the shelf for my kids to pick up and read. I don't assign them. And I also have some France history books. I have two. One is by Gerber. And the other one is by, I don't know who it was. Sorry. So we do have those because France has influenced our history also, but not to the same extent as Britain has. And last but not least, okay, so world history. There are a lot of resources for world history. And there I go again, dropping my books. I'm a stickler. I love having history books that come right to modern day. And I like history books that have, I didn't have a good one. I like books that are up to modern and also contain accurate information. So before I switched to the Charlotte Mason method, I was a classical education homeschooler. And this is the book we used at that time. It's a series of books. It's called The Story of the World, History for the Classical Child by Susan Weisbauer. And we still use these books. There's 4 of them. It goes from the ancient times, basically from the beginning of the world till modern day. It's 4 books. And we read 1 book a year. And we cycle through a 4-year cycle. And we love these books. Right now we're reading these books. We're in book 2, finishing book 2 and going into book 3 for this year. And we really like them. You can read them from grade 1 to grade 8. Once my kids get around middle grade 7, grade 8, they kind of get tired of these and they want more sustenance because they're written for probably more like a grade 3, 4, 5 level. And once they get into that level, then I am moving into, if they need a substitute, I move into something like this, called the Almanac of World History. It's by National Geographic, and it's a really good book. It's a really good overview of world history, and so they read that one. And I also have the National Geographic Concise History of the World. This is more of a informational book. It's like a timeline with commentaries, but this is also a resource we use. Okay? And so that's what my older kids would read alongside us, or in addition to these ones here. They would read these on top of that so that they get a more deeper, mature perspective, right? Because in these, they're not telling you all the details because some of the kids can't handle some of the details. I mean, it's really, history is fierce, you know. There's some really nasty stuff that goes on. And so the author of those books has used a lot of tact in explaining what happens in history without giving all the gory details, right? Which I like. And then once my kids get into high school, we start using the high school version books, and they are right here. And right now, it's by the same author, Susan Wise Bauer, and it's right here. It's this series of books right here. They're called, they start with the history of the ancient world, and then the history of the medieval world, the history of the Renaissance world, and then she hasn't done the rest yet. There's 2 more to go, I think. Or 1, 2. She's still finishing up the last bit. But because we have so much world history already, and we have these books over here, sorry, I'm going so fast. We have these books over here, the almanac. My boys haven't missed out on any history of present day because we have it up to date. So that's what we use for history, and that's what we do. I have looked at tons of history books, and this is what I've settled on, and I'm not going to change unless somebody brings out an amazing book. So if you know somebody who's a great writer, who loves history and loves Canadian history, please send them to me. I want them to write a book, because it would be lovely to have a good history book for Canada, and one that's interesting, not boring. Because actually, I've come to realize Canadian history is interesting, and we have a rich history. It's just that we don't have as many wars. And our culture is different. We're much more of a peaceful people. We do things in a way that is different from other countries. We would rather resolve things in a peaceful way than having war. And that produces a certain type of culture versus, let's say, the United States, where they fought for their rights. And because of that, they have a much different, they're different from us in that they're more aggressive and vocal in what they do. We're a lot more quieter and peaceful and don't rattle the boat kind of people. But, we can learn from both peoples, right? So that's my history, and if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll try to answer them the best that I can. And, that's all I have to share. All right, so you have a good evening, and I will talk to you soon.